أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. After Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi and the Muslims took back Mecca, took back what was rightfully theirs, the houses that they had left 8 years prior, which still belonged to them. They finally came back home to be settled in Mecca. Some Muslims stayed, some Muslims would go back to Medina. But before they went back to Medina, a close by village, about 3 days to get there, 3 days far away, there was a tribe by the name of Hawazin. And you will notice this trend, it kept happening. Whenever Rasulullah made a new victory, you notice every lecture after the other, another tribe now wants to attack the Muslims because it's getting worried about their strength. So this tribe, Hawazin, they begin to gather. And although they are fewer in number, they believe that there's no one else to take out Rasulullah except them now. Now Quraysh is gone. Quraysh has been defeated by Rasulullah, and many people from Quraysh have become Muslims. Now that Rasulullah has taken over Mecca, Hawazin decide it's time for us. قَدْ فَرَغَ لَنَا لَا نِهَايَ لَهُ دُونَنَا. He is ours, there is no end to him except through us. So they begin to gather each other. They start to rally each other up. We're going to surround him with 20,000 swords, and we'll attack him, the attack of one man, until we finish Muhammad. Now Rasulullah heard about this. He sent men to go and confirm. His messengers went, they embedded into the opposition army, and they would see them as they rile each other up. What they're going to do to the Muslims, they're going to come and take over. And so he came back to Rasulullah, he tells him, "O Prophet of God, it's true. It's true. They are coming, Hawazin is gathering, they've gathered around 4,000 soldiers, and some men from other tribes. And they're coming towards the Muslims." And so Rasulullah now gathered the Muslims, decided to do it quickly. He was able to gather the 10,000 that came with him from Medina. And now there were 2,000. Sallallahu Muhammad wa Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Other salawat please for Imam Hussain alayhi salam.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Another one in the name of Imam Hussain alayhi salam.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
The name of Sayyidah Zahra in your loudest voices.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
And so Rasulullah was able to gather 10,000 Muslims, plus 2,000 from within Mecca who has now become Muslim. So now they have 12,000. And with them some kuffar came, with them some women came. They just want to see what's going to happen now. Never has Rasulullah had 12,000 with him before. They leave Mecca. As they're leaving Mecca, there's a certain feeling in this army that's different to every other Muslim army. Now, for once, they have more men than the opposition. And so some of the companions begin to say, "La nughlab al-yawm al-qilla." Today we will not be defeated from a short number of men. When Rasulullah heard this, he felt hurt. It hurt him. He didn't want this. He doesn't want them to rely on the material, to rely on their manpower or weaponry. It's always been based on faith up till now. It was always based on faith to God. They were always the underdog. For once now, they're not the underdog. They have tripled the men. Yet now there's a certain arrogance in the Islamic army. Rasulullah kept trying to calm this down. He kept telling them, "Be patient, we'll be victorious. Be truthful, we'll be victorious." And he told them, "We're going to be victorious." So they had faith and knew to keep the iman of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to keep relying on the above, on the sky, not the earth. And Rasulullah set out this army in a special way. He let Quraysh, the men from Quraysh, take the lead. He wanted to make peace with Quraysh. This was also a big test for the relationship of Quraysh and Islam. These Qurayshis who have become Muslim. How is Rasulullah going to treat them? They're all still suspicious. Is he going to kill us? Is he going to hurt us? What's going to happen? He tells them, no, I'm going to put you at the front line. And Khalid ibn Walid is going to be your head. And another tribe with them, Bani Sulaym, which joined the Prophet. They're going to be the vanguard of the army. They're the piercing head. So they start going towards a valley known as Hunayn. Now this valley Hunayn, Hawazin had already reached there before the Muslims. And he began to assault their formation. He began to hide. As the Muslims approached, about 3 days worth of traveling, they were entering into the valley of Hunayn, and they were taken by surprise, in an ambush. So Hawazin was throwing arrows and shots down at the Muslims. The Muslims didn't see it coming. Who was at the front? Quraysh and Bani Sulaym. Bani Sulaym, they are related to Hawazin, so they didn't fight. They declared that they won't fight. When they were in Hunayn, they all began to run away. When they ran away, now Quraysh is by itself and the army is behind them. When they ran away, Quraysh started to run away. So they went smack into each other. They all started running. The Muslims behind them were confused. They didn't know what's going on. It was chaos. Although they were 12,000 and in front of them was 4,000, the 4,000 were taking out the Muslims. And they would shout, this is the time. And the hypocrites from the Muslim camp, now they came out. So now they're all shouting, "Khuduluhu, fahada waqtuh." Now is the time we can betray Rasulullah. He thought he's coming with a strong army. See, what happened in Hunayn wasn't normal. It wasn't a normal defeat. Now they were being defeated after Badr, after Ahzab, after Uhud, after everything that they went through, all the patience, all the struggles. Now, when they are greater in number, they're losing the battle. And they begin to run. Just like Uhud. Everyone now is running. And the hypocrites are trying to kill Rasulullah. A man by the name of Sheba, his father was killed by Imam Ali alayhi salam in Uhud. Remember one of the savages? His father was Uthman ibn Abi Talha, one of the flag bearers. So now Sheba comes to Rasulullah to attack him. Rasulullah stops, puts his hand on his chest and tells him, "Idhab anhu shaitan." And then the man stops completely in his tracks. Rasulullah begins to shout to them to come back. People are running. Abu Sufyan is standing on a hilltop with Muawiyah and some other companions, and they're looking towards the battle, and they say they won't be defeated until they reach the sea. So he's predicting now the Muslims are going to be pushed back to the sea and killed. Only about 8 to 13 men remained. There's different narrations about how many men exactly there were. Some say 8, some say 11, 13. About 8 to 10 of them were from Bani Hashim. So Aqil, son of Abu Talib, was there. Imam Ali alayhi salam was there. Abbas was there. And Osama ibn Zayd. You know Jaysh Osama? Osama was 15 years old here. He was there. They're still there. Only a few of them. And they're trying to defend the fort. And the Muslims are running. And they're shouting. And then Imam Ali alayhi salam stepped up. Now the battle of Hunayn, it became legendary afterwards for what Imam Ali did in Hunayn. Just like he did in Uhud, it was a very similar performance this time. An English historian, he writes that in this battle, Imam Ali alayhi salam, he was like a demon possessed. He stood there, he began, only about 8 to 10 of them behind him, and the Imam began to fight anyone in his way. It's a true story of legends. And when you watch the movies, it was like that. It was greater than that. It's a real life warrior. Outnumbered by tens, coming at him, killing whoever's in his way. He killed 40 men in front of him. Their flag bearer came, Abu Jardal. He came with his flag, and the Imam split him in two. Rasulullah ran towards the Imam and would stand by him. And they would fight with each other, with the Bani Hashim with them. And Rasulullah began to tell Abbas, shout to the Muslims to come back. Tell them to come back. So Abbas is known to have a strong voice, so he begins to shout. He tells them, "O Muslims, the ones who pledged allegiance under the tree, come back. إِلَىٰ أَيْنَ تَفِرُّونَ? Where are you going? Where are you running to? Come back, you pledged allegiance. Where are you going?" People keep running. A certain woman would ask, "Where are you running to?" And certain companions would say, "This is what Allah wants. Whatever we do, victory and defeat's already been written, one of the companions. Victory's already been written, it doesn't matter what we do. They're running. Then Rasulullah begins to shout himself. It's almost as if Rasulullah lost hope in the Muhajirin because he started to shout, Ya Ansar, Ya Ansar. Then he began to say, Ya Khazraj, Ya Bani Khazraj. The Khazraj from the Ansar. They were known to have more faith. Ya Ansar Rasulullah, Anna Rasulullah, Anna Muhammad ibn Abdullah, Anna Nabi, la Kathib, Anna ibn Abdul Muttalib. He would say that, he would fight. I am the Prophet of God. I am the Prophet without lying. I'm the son of Abdul Muttalib. I am the Prophet of God. And he'd tell them to come back. As the Muslims were running and they'd see, wait, something happened. Why are they not attacking us anymore? They saw Imam Ali alayhi salam massacring them. As the Imam massacred their flag bearer and anyone who stood in the way, some Muslims began to come back. Slowly, in groups. Until 80 men came back and they stood with the Imam and Rasulullah. Then it was 100. Then slowly it grew until the Muslims were able to defeat the tribe of Hawazin. And then the tribe began to run. It ran in 3 directions. Now, Rasulullah told Imam Ali to stay in this area. And he followed them where? To Ta'if. Remember Ta'if? The place where they told Rasulullah to get out back in the Meccan days. So Rasulullah goes back to Ta'if, this is where they are, they hide in their fort. Rasulullah lays siege to that fort. But this time, he doesn't do like he did with the Bani Qurayda or the Bani Qaynaqa or Bani Nadir in Mecca. He doesn't do it like he did with the Jews. He sieged this place only to show them what the Muslims are capable of. He didn't cut any trees, and he didn't force them to become Muslim or to accept the tax. He just threatened them. He threatened them. He said, never has a kingdom or a people gone against me except that I رَمَيْتُهُمْ بِسَهْمِ اللَّهِ. I shot at them with the arrow of God. So then the people asked, who is the arrow of God, Ya Rasulullah? He said, Ali ibn Abi Talib. Well done. He threatened them with the Imam. You could easily have brought Imam Ali and do the same thing they did in Khaybar. They did it in Khaybar, they could do it again. But he didn't. The Hajj season was nearing. And he had to bring the Muslims back. And so he left. He left the siege. He left them. But this proved fruitful because those people of Hawazin, later on they sent a delegation to Rasulullah and they by themselves became Muslim. And so Rasulullah's mercy upon them drew them close to him and then they became Muslim. They tell us he was violent. And so now Rasulullah returns to Mecca and then returns to Medina. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
6 months after the event of Hunayn, Rasulullah now was in Medina. And at this time, the Roman army, or the Roman ambassador in Syria, and the Roman emperor, they had begun to hear more about Islam. After the Battle of Mu'tah, when they defeated the 3,000 strong Muslim army and they killed Ja'far al-Tayyar, they had underestimated Islam. They thought this was the power. But now they see it growing and they were fearing it. So they got in contact with the Christian Arabs who were also worrying about the growth of Islam at the time. And they decided to form an alliance and attack Medina, just like Hawazin, 6 months later. But this time it was Rome. This time it was the Romans, the Byzantine king. So now the Muslims are not as eager to fight. Who wants to fight with the Romans? Their power is unmatched. Rasulullah receives the intel about the impending attack, and so again he begins to organize the Muslims because he must come out of Medina and go meet them somewhere. He doesn't want them to come into Medina and take over. So he begins to tell all the Muslims to get themselves ready and tell other tribes to join. In the meantime, this 6-month period, Islam had grown exponentially. Rasulullah was able to gather 30,000 soldiers. 30,000 to go and fight with the Romans on the border of Syria. Now the hypocrites, Abdullah ibn Ubay for example, he would pretend that he would fight with him. The Muslims, they would lay camp around Medina, but he withdrew and came back into Medina as usual. The other Muslims would await until Rasulullah had to leave. The day came, Rasulullah now was going to set forth to go and fight perhaps the greatest battle that the Muslims are going to fight. But he receives divine revelation that says, O Prophet of God, either you stay in Medina and let Ali ibn Abi Talib go, or Ali goes, or Ali stays and you go. One of you has to stay, one of you goes. That's the difference between Superman and Rasulullah. And Superman's weakness, he can't be in two places at once, but Rasulullah can be. So Rasulullah now has to choose which one goes to Medina, which one stays in Medina, which one goes to fight the Romans. So he goes and asks Imam Ali what he thinks. He goes to the Imam and tells him, look, one of us has to stay here because now we are very vulnerable. If I'm leaving with absolutely everyone, and at this time we're going to fight the Romans, other tribes might think this is the best time to attack the Muslims in Medina, especially that there are hypocrites within the government. Now there's 30,000 Muslims. There's so many Muslims now. There are so many hypocrites. So many people that want to hurt Islam from within. So someone had to stay in Medina. So he tells Imam Ali this. As he's telling him, what should we do? Imam Ali says, أخرج معك? Can I just go with you? He says, one of us has to stay. Medina will not be safe except with me or you. And so the Imam is saddened by this, but he says, the obedience is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Prophet. Even though I don't like to be separated from you, I will stay here. I'll stay in Medina. And so Imam Ali staying in Medina will stop anyone from getting into any fishy business. Rasulullah told them, your presence will stop them. So Rasulullah now is leaving, but rumors begin to spread around Medina that Rasulullah left Imam Ali with the children and the women because he would be bothered to take him with him. It would be difficult for Rasulullah to take him. He didn't want to really take him. And this hurts Ali ibn Abi Talib, what the people are saying. So he follows Rasulullah. Just before he leaves Medina, he goes to him, and Rasulullah tells him, what are you doing here? He says, Prophet of God, the people are saying that you've left me behind because it's hard upon you to take me. And he's sad. The Prophet begins to laugh. He says, Ya Ali, isn't it enough that you're the skin in between my eyes, and you're the soul for my body, and you are the station to me like Harun is to Musa, except there's no prophet after me, and that I cannot leave without making you my Khalifa? And he said the word Khalifa, like specifically, it's something that our brothers in the other school of thought, they say that, why didn't Rasulullah say the word Khalifa? Why did he say Mawla? He said Khalifa. In their sources, he said Khalifa. Here he said it. Or they may say that Rasulullah only said this to the Imam to cheer him up because he was upset. But this wasn't the only time that he said it to him. He said it to him on a pact of brotherhood. He said it to him in Ghadir. He said it to him in Mina. He said it to him when Imam Hassan and Hussain were born. He said it to him everywhere, again and again and again. He said it to him in Ahzab. He said it to him the day of the hadith of the Abwab, Sidul Abwab illa Baba, close all the doors except his door. He said it again and again and again. And he would leave other people to be in charge of cities. He would never tell them this, if this was the case. That they are the station to him of Harun to Musa. You know what Harun was to Musa? In the Quran tells us what Harun was to Musa. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says to Musa, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. صلى الله عليه وسلم. اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى قال ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي واجعل من أهلي واجعل وزيرا من أهلي واجعل وزيرا من أهلي and make a ambassador from my family. Later on he said واشركه في أمري واشركه في أمري, make him a sharik with me in the same task as me. I mean, it's so specific. واشركه في أمري واجعل وزيرا من أهلي هارون أخي اشدد به أزري واشركه في أمري. It's very clear what Harun is to Musa. And when Musa went to Tur Sina and he came back, Harun didn't retire. He stayed his ambassador. Even though he passed away before Nabi Musa. If Nabi Musa had died before him, he would have taken over after him. And so Rasulullah tells this to Imam Ali alayhi salam. And Ali says, okay, radayt. Okay, I'll go back. And so he went back to Medina and he was protected from anyone trying to harm him. So Rasulullah, he set forth with the army. And they called this army Jaysh al-Usra because they went through so many difficulties. This is the campaign of Tabuk. On the campaign of Tabuk, the Muslims had so many difficulties through the scorching heat. They would have to put cloths around their face. And Rasulullah, whenever he'd see these things, he'd begin to give lectures about the afterlife, about how one can lose himself to the dunya when he sees the scorching heat around them with the winds, the hot winds of the desert, as they move towards Syria. And as they're going, some people would come to Rasulullah and they tell him, there are men behind. So the Prophet would say, if there's any good in them, then they'll follow you. And if there isn't any good in them, then Allah has rescued you from them. Then someone comes and says, Ya Rasulullah, Abu Dhar is not here. Abu Dhar. So the Prophet says, once again, if there's any good in them, they'll follow you. And if there isn't, then God rescued you from them. You see, he didn't care that it was someone closer to him or not. He gave a principle, whoever follows the principle. Just. And so Abu Dhar, he was late because of his animal. It wouldn't move. Abu Dhar narrates, I kept trying to move it wouldn't move. And so I was late upon joining the Muslims. Once I realized the animal wasn't going to move, I got on foot and I took my belongings on my back and I caught up to them on foot. After half a day of traveling, the thirst overtook me, but I saw someone in the distance, a Muslim. And he began to shout, "Oh Prophet of God, there's someone in the distance coming towards us." So the Prophet said before looking, it's Abu Dhar. He knew, because he knew Abu Dhar's sincerity. And he knew his spirit, and he knew he wasn't with him. So he knew it would be him coming. So may God have mercy on Abu Dhar. He walks alone, he will die alone, and he'll be brought back alone. And it's true, he did, he died alone. I think only his daughter was by his side when he passed away. Another man, by the name of Malik bin Qais, he had come back from a journey. He came into Medina, and he realized all the Muslims had already left. So he went, sat at home, his wife made him some food, drink, and he sat there. And it says that he looked at his wife's face, and he looked at the food and the water, and he said, "This is not just. How can my master be out there while I sit down with my wife and eat and drink, and he's in the scorching heat? That's not what friendship is. And that's not what justice is." So he didn't eat. He got up, he got dressed, and he set upon his way to go join the Muslims. There were some very sincere Muslims at the time, just like there were some very severe hypocrites. And so Rasulullah now was coming closer towards Syria. Once he reached the border, he reached the place of Tabuk, where there was a great fortress there, but it was empty. There was no one there. There was no sign of any Romans. No sign of any Christian armies. And Rasulullah had brought this massive army with him. What had happened was that when the Romans had got wind of what Rasulullah was doing and what kind of army he was coming with, they stopped and they went back, and they actually denied that they even gathered any soldiers in the first place. They denied it. But this in itself scattered the Romans. And the name of Islam was spread so far in Arabia that he was able to scare the Romans. So it brought much prestige to the Muslims. Many people decided to come to Islam after this, became Muslim after this. And Rome stayed where it was. And the Muslims now, they got to know about the areas outside of Medina more. They had traveled to a new area that they hadn't gone to before. Areas that they would go to again in the future. So now they knew about the land. So there were many positives to take. And no one passed away. No one died, didn't have to fight, no war. Rasulullah's stance made sure that Rome went back into its place and they wouldn't think about attacking Rasulullah again. So the Prophet decided, him and the Muslims decided, well, let's go back together. They come back, and Rasulullah, on his way back, there's some people, about 12 men from his army. They begin to go behind him on the hilltops. When Rasulullah was traveling through the narrow valley with Ammar and a man named Huzaifa, they were trying to push the rocks onto the Prophet to scare his camel so that he may fall from the cliff. They tried to assassinate him. Muslims from his army. From his army. And the Muslims, they were really confusing. Some of them were so good, some of them were really despicable. And the names of these Muslims, they are written down later on. Huzaifa tells us who they are in other hadiths. So Rasulullah turns and he sees them. He tells Huzaifa to stop them. So Huzaifa starts to threaten them with his stick. So when the men realized that Rasulullah saw them, they ran away. And when they run, Huzaifa tells him, I know who the men were by the signs on their camels. Shall I tell you who they were? And Rasulullah tells him, no. Keep the identity secret, they may repent. But later on, if I do anything to them, because Huzaifa was saying, let me tell you who they are so we can punish them. He said, people will say that Muhammad, now that he has power, he punishes his friends. So he said, let them be. Don't hurt them. And with the companions of Rasulullah, many times, they would do things to hurt Rasulullah and he would forgive them, to the point of assassination. But you know what would hurt more than this even? Is when he feels like he has faith in a people and they hurt him. Because that happened on their way back from Hunayn. Before Tabuk, it happened with the other companions too. Not assassination, alhamdulillah. They were sincere companions, they were good. They were of the Ansar that came and helped Rasulullah with Imam Ali. But when Rasulullah was coming back, he come back with a great bounty with him. And that bounty, you know what he did with it? He gave it to Quraysh. He gave Abu Sufyan 100 camels and a bunch of sheep to Abu Sufyan. And so there were many Muslims within the camp that doubted Rasulullah, even after everything they had been through. And they began to talk amongst each other. And one would say, the Prophet used us to gain power, and now we've forgotten about us. And others within the Ansar would tell him, no, don't say that. That's ridiculous. Don't say something like that about the Prophet. But this is not fair. This is unjust. And so they elected Sa'ad ibn Ibadah to go and talk to Rasulullah about this. So Sa'ad, he goes to Rasulullah and he tells him, Ya Rasulullah, this is not fair. If this is from God, then okay. But if this is from you, it's not just that you gave all this bounty to Quraysh, and what did we get? And Rasulullah said, this is what your people are saying? He says, yes. And I wanted to read you guys the khutbah of what Rasulullah said to him, because the words are so beautiful. But Rasulullah says himself, so I didn't want to say it in English only. So Sallallahu Alaihi Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So Rasulullah says to him, what about you, Sa'd? How do you feel about this, personally? So Sa'd says, مَا أَنَا إِلَّا أَمْرُءٌ مِّن قَوْمِي. I'm just a man from my people. They still had respect when they spoke to him, but what he said basically is, I agree with them. Me and my people feel that you are unjust with us. So Rasulullah says, okay, call them. He sits with them on his own. No one else. Imam Ali is there. They come, the Ansar come in front of Rasulullah, and he tells them, مَا حَدِيث بَلَّغَنِي عَنْكُمْ. What's Sa'd been saying? And so they tell him, this is not fair what you've done. You've given them all that bounty. So, Rasulullah says, إِنِّي سَائِلَكُمْ عَنْ أَمْرٍ فَأَجِيبُونِي عَنْ. I'm going to ask you about something and you guys answer me. They said, okay. قُلْ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ فَقَالَ أَلَسْتُمْ كُنْتُمْ ضَالِّينَ فَهَدَاكُمُ اللَّهُ بِي. Were you not misguided and God guided you through me? Then they began to cry. They said, بَلَى. Then Rasul said, أَلَمْ تَكُونُوا عَلَى شِفَى حَفْرَةٍ مِنَ النَّارِ فَأَنْقَذَكُمُ اللَّهُ بِي. Weren't you so close to the hellfire and God saved you from it? And they'd cry and say, بَلَى. أَلَمْ تَكُونُوا قَلِيلًا فَكَثَّرَكُمُ اللَّهُ بِي. Were you not just a few men and God made you great of many numbers through me? And they said, بَلَى. And they cried. أَلَمْ تَكُونُوا أَعْدَاءَ فَأَلَّفَ اللَّهُ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ بِي. You know, the Ansar are made up of the Aus and the Khazraj. And Aus and Khazraj, they killed each other for decades. And now they were brothers. They were both together called Ansar. And Rasul tells them, were you not enemies? And I joined your hearts together. And they began to cry, Bala. Then he was silent. And they wouldn't say anything. And he said, answer me. Ala tajibuni? I told you to answer me. And they're crying. And they said, بِمَا نَجِيبُكَ فَذَاكَ أَبَاؤُنَا وَأُمَّهَاتُنَا. May our parents be sacrificed for you. How are we going to answer you after all of that? And they're crying, and they want to kiss his hands and his feet. But you see, Rasulullah, he stops them.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So he says, but you can also say, أما لو شئتم لقلتم. You can say to me, وأنت قد كنت جئتنا طريدا فأويناك. You were exiled, and we welcomed you. وجئتنا خائفا فآمناك. And you came fearful, and we protected you. مخذولا فنصرناك. And you were betrayed, and we made you victorious. وجئتنا مكذبا فصدقناك. And you came and everyone said that you were lying, and we believed you. Rasulullah is telling them to say this, to save their face. And they would cry more, they'd kiss his hands. Then he said, يا معشر الأنصار إن قريشا حديث وحد بجاهلية ومصيبة. That Quraysh, they're just coming out of kufr and calamity. وإني أردت أن أخبرهم أن أجبرهم وأتألفهم. And I wanted to bind them and make them feel like I'm trying to make them be comfortable to be Muslims and come closer. أغضبتم معشر الأنصار. أغضبتم. Are you upset, يا أنصار? في أنفسكم بشيء قليل من الدنيا ولفت به قوما ليسلموا. Are you upset, O Ansar, from something small from the dunya that I used to bring people's hearts together? وَكَلْتُكُمْ إِلَى إِيمَانِكُمْ. So I used dunya to bring these people together, but with you guys, I left faith for you. I felt that your Islam and your faith is enough to keep you strong. أَفَلَا تَرْدُونَ يَا مَعْشَرَ الْأَنصَارِ أَنْ يُذْهَبَ النَّاسِ إِلَى رِحَالِهِمْ بِالشَّاةِ وَالنِّعَمِ. Aren't you happy that the people can go back to their towns with their sheep and their bounty? وَتُذْهَبُونَ أَنْتُمْ إِلَى رِحَالِكُمْ وَفِي سَهْمِكُمْ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. They go with their bounty, but you go home with Rasulullah. I'm going back to Medina with you. So he says, if it was not for the hijrah, I would be from the Ansar. May God have mercy on the Ansar, and the sons of the Ansar, and the sons of the sons of the Ansar. And if the Ansar went into a valley and everyone was into another valley, I'd go into the valley of the Ansar. And everyone's crying and they're kissing his hands. You see, even when they would hurt him, he would respond in such a way. He's so kind. And so from here, I just wanted to answer a brother. He asked me a question yesterday. At the end of the lecture, I told him we'll answer it today because the surah that he mentioned came down after the Fatah of Mecca, around the time of Tabuk. And after we understand how Rasulullah truly treats his people, even enemies too. And the Fatah of Mecca showed us that. And so the famous ayah goes in Surah At-Tawbah, the 5th ayah, and we all know it. Slay them wherever you find them. And you hear it everywhere. Slay them wherever you find them. Slay them wherever you find them. And the brother told me, his professors, they say that Islam is built upon violence and is spread by the sword. And so how can I respond to this person? Because maybe it is spread on violence. And I said, it's not. If you just study the life of the Prophet, it's not. First of all, if someone says it is, they have to bring the evidence for the claim they made. And if their evidence is slay them wherever you find them, then let's talk about slay them wherever you find them. Because this comes across a lot of the time. And many times people don't look at the ayah before or the ayah afterwards. Or in what context it was put in. Context, right? It's all context. Allah, if you were being chased by your dad, and he's saying, I want to eat you, and you're running, and everyone just captures the part where you're running and you're scared, and he's really going to eat you. And he tells everyone, Dad's going to eat her. And it stops, and there's no jokes. And someone comes and interviews you, and they say, how do you feel? Yeah, I was really scared, he's going to eat me. Looks really bad. It's just a dad playing with a child. Have you guys watched the film Red Dawn? Red Dawn? That's an insane film. Very, very shocking that they actually made a film like that. So North Korea, they come into America, and they take over everything. And then there's a few teenage Americans, and they fight off the North Koreans, the resistance, right? Because North Koreans came into their land, they took their homes, so they're the good guys. Okay, it's context. So the Muslims now, they're in Mecca. Rasulullah is just trying to speak to people about Islam. So they oppress him, they kill his people, they hurt him, they crucify some people, they force him to run away. So now the Muslims leave their families, their businesses, everything, they go to Medina. And now they live in Medina and the Quraysh won't let them go. War after war after war. 3 major wars coming to kill them. After he left, all he wanted was just let me speak to the Arabs. They said no. And now they're still not home. They're still exiled. So Quraysh is the North Koreans. They're still exiled. Then they make a treaty, Hudaybiyah, to make peace. He begins to speak to the Arabs. Again, Quraysh break the treaty. Again, they massacre his followers. Again and again and again. And Rasulullah has never ever broken the treaty. Ever. With any tribe he made, he never broke one condition of the treaty. Not one. Through 23 years of propagation. Not one treaty, not one condition on any treaty did he break. Yet again, they break treaty after treaty, war after war. So finally, he decides, we're going back to take our homes. And they go back, and they take their homes. And then how does he treat the people in Mecca? No killing. Everyone, go to the Kaaba, you're safe. Under the banner, you're safe. In the house of Abu Sufyan, you're safe. In your houses, you're safe. Doesn't want any killing at all. Make everything peaceful. And once he takes over Mecca, once the Quraysh are under his power, what does he do? He lets them go. He tells them, he doesn't kill anyone. He doesn't hold anyone prisoner. He gives Abu Sufyan the greatest bounty from Hunayn when he didn't even take part in it. I mean, this is the violent man that our professors want to talk about. And then the surah comes down, Surah At-Tawbah. And it says that the people within Mecca, for 4 months, they have time to think about if they want to become Muslim or not. If they decide in those 4 months to become Muslim, they can become Muslim, and it's fine, everything's okay. If not, they have to leave. And they better not come back, because if they do, slay them wherever you find them. That's it. In that specific scenario, in that context, after that whole story, that's it. But then a pastor wants to come here, another man wants to come here, and burn the Quran. And the Quran is a violent book. If they want to talk about violent books, we can talk about violent books. But we don't do that. Why? Because we don't want to take their verses out of context. It will be the same thing. But at least educate yourself about before and after. By the way, Ayah 6, this is Ayah 5. After Ayah 6 of Surah At-Tawbah, it talks about people who didn't even know about the treaty. That it was broken. That they're safe. Before and after. I mean, Rasulullah is such an oppression to him to say that he was harsh. Because from an individual level, one can say he was harsh. When you look at Jesus, for example, Jesus kept religion. He didn't try to instigate into his society. That wasn't his role. Rasulullah tried to bring a religion into a society, into the world. And when you do that, you're going to have to deal with war, with justice, and retribution. You're going to have to. And any emperor, or any king, or any nation, or any government has to deal with that. Any government, wherever it may be. And so if there is a war, and a soldier kills another soldier, someone might see that as harsh. But he has to do that to protect the borders of his government, or of his own way of life if he's being attacked. And so the same way with Rasulullah, when it came to retribution or war or justice, he was this way. So someone can look at Badr or Uhud, and they can say maybe Imam Ali was harsh, Rasulullah was harsh when they're fighting an opponent in a very non-contextual battle. But if you look at the whole picture, Rasulullah in his personal life, how he acted with everyone who he could have hurt, but didn't, and Fatah of Mecca is the greatest example of this. Look how he treated them. He gave them all the bounty, and he didn't give anything to his friends. Yet he told them, Rasulullah is coming with you. So it's greater than anything they get from the dunya. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi.